So the Super Bowl's this weekend. Maybe we'll have a video on what the Bears can learn about the Bengals or from the Bengals as well as the LA Rams. So what's up, guys? Welcome into the Fireside Bears YouTube channel. Usayd alongside Max Smith here. You can follow us on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Fireside Bears. You can follow myself and Max on Twitter at Usayd Kosho and at Max Smith ESM. Max, it's been a long week. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, it's definitely been a long week. We're waiting for the Super Bowl here. We're recording this on Thursday night. Bears news has been slow outside of a couple of coaches here and there. We're in that point of the offseason where we're just kind of waiting for the Super Bowl to come and pass so we can start really looking at things like free agency and scouting, which is today's episode. We're going to be talking about the free agent market. It's never too early to start looking at that. We're going to highlight some of the Bears' needs and talk about some guys, top five potential free agents that the Chicago Bears can bring in that will really, really help the team come next season.
Yeah, anyways, guys, so we're going to be looking at, pretty much everything that's going down in free agency, but let's just get into the needs first and foremost because the Bears' needs this year are a little bit interesting, right? Because you have a team that compared to the last time the Bears were truly starting over with a new head coach and a new general manager, I think kind of the feel around the Bears roster this time is that there's certainly more building blocks, but outside of the building blocks, there's also some pretty good veteran players, namely a Robert Quinn, a Khalil Mack, Roquan Smith, who's going into year 5. And then on the offensive side of the ball, I know that this is a polarizing player, but, Cody Whitehair, nice to have him as a veteran presence on the offensive line. Another super polarizing player as of late is David Montgomery, because I know that there were arguments on Bears Twitter last week regarding how to use David Montgomery, and today people are arguing about whether or not Terry Cohen's going back. But the point is, this roster overall has some of the foundation already built. And when Matt Eberflus kind of talked about laying the foundation for basically building a house, he was saying bottom to top is how we're going to build this thing up. We're going to go inside out, which means we're going to invest in the trenches first. And, really, when I look at the Bears' needs this season, I mean, the biggest need for me is wide receiver simply because I don't understand or when you look at these advanced game statistics and these advanced passing metrics, something that sticks out is Justin Fields is all over the place. And I want to clarify that because I think a lot of people, if I were to just say Justin Fields is all over the place, they would kind of take it as, oh, well, Fields had his ups and downs. No, Justin did have his ups and downs. That's true. But when I say Justin was all over the place, I just mean that in terms of some of these metrics, such as consistency as a passing offense, the Bears as a whole were the worst team in the NFL last year, or probably one of the worst teams. They were certainly one of the worst. But the reason I bring that up is because wide receiver is the biggest need. You can't develop your quarterback and not have pass catchers. Okay. You need more than Darnell Mooney. And last season really showed this, right? That you need more than Darnell Mooney. Okay. I understand there's a lot of Bears fans out there who love Darnell Mooney. He's a great player, great person. But also at the end of the day, like last season showed the Bears need more than Darnell Mooney, number one. Number two, looking and sticking with the wide receivers. If there was any of these wide receivers that's an impending free agent that I was going to bring back, I would say Marquise Goodwin, only because when Goodwin did play, there were times you certainly saw the chemistry being established with Justin Fields. And also, just a little fun fact, Fields, as I've said multiple times before, is a deep to short passer. He always wants the deep play, always wants the big play. He's pretty much a gunslinger without a gunslinger's arm, okay? But the reason I bring that up is simply because Goodwin has the ability to have those big game breaking plays. And when you combine that with the type of offense Luke Getsy's going to run, guess what? Marquise Goodwin's a great fit because I believe it was 2017 where Marquise Goodwin had one of his best seasons under Kyle Shanahan, year 1 in San Francisco. Just saying.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something important to point out. Whenever we look at the needs, we look at what we currently have, especially with how many guys are on one-year contracts or contracts are ending this offseason. Marquise Goodwin is one of them. But then another one is Jakeem Grant, who, of course, was just at the Pro Bowl. I think he's a name that the Bears need to retain this season. Be ashamed to trade for him in the middle of the season and let him walk. He solved some of the answers in regards to our punt return game, and he's showed some utility at the position as well. He's a potential slot down the line for the Bears. They could probably bring him back for a pretty good check. But when we look at the wide receiver position, we look at the abundance of talent on the market right now, and we're coming off of a year last year where teams weren't really putting out as much money as traditional. So the market's still a little weak when it comes to these free agents. That should be exciting. Last year, the free agent market was probably a little underwhelming because of the talent. But this year, there's some heavy hitters. We look at guys like, of course, Davante Adams is potentially, depending who knows what's going to happen there, but it's more likely than not he's going to hit the free agent market. Allen Robinson, more often than not, going to hit our market. Chris Godwin, be surprised if he re-signs with the Buccaneers. He's going to have a massive contract there. They used their franchise tag on him last year. Not going to happen this year. We look at guys like Juju Smith-Schuster, who could easily see a career revival in a different offensive scheme. When we look at that, we also look at guys like DJ Chark, who I'm super big on. I think that's a name that the Bears need to look at 100%. He's ridiculously undervalued. He's a 6'4" speedster wide receiver. Be crazy if we get rid of Allen Robinson just to get another tall position but fast wide receiver from Jacksonville. Kind of crazy how that rotating door works. Thank you, Jacksonville, if we end up getting it. I guess that's a farm for good wide receivers now. Speedsters like Zay Jones out of Las Vegas. There's just a bunch. And Mike Williams, of course, from the Chargers, who had a bit of a breakout year this year and will be a big name as well. But one of the names that is flying under the radar is, of course, Michael Gallup, who had a bit of a hard year this year in regards to injuries down in Dallas. But he can ball, right? He's an absolute just an all-in-all great wide receiver. And when we're looking at scheme and we're looking at scheme fit, because what Luke Getsy had his first press availability today, and he made it very clear that the offense is going to be built around the players. That scheme is absolutely 100% important. But scheme, right, goes around the players that you currently have. You can't force squares into circle pegs. That was basically Luke Getsy's philosophy. And I think that's something that's refreshing. We haven't heard that in the past regime. So that'll be really cool to see. But my number one guy to target, I think, if we're looking at the wide receiver market right now, is probably DJ Chark. If you can't get him, let's look at Michael Gallup. And I'm telling you right now, DJ Chark's going to go for a lot less money than Michael Gallup has, just because Michael Gallup has more prestige, I guess, and a name recognition. Bears should definitely make an attempt at Chris Godwin. I think he's too good not to. Whatever that offer letter is, would probably come in a little low, but it just, there's an abundance of talent in this market. So I would not be surprised, and this is a controversial take, but I would not be surprised if the Bears did not draft a wide receiver. I'm saying that with complete and total honesty. I would not be surprised because of the abundance of talent in this current market and the other needs that the Bears need to build through, need to get good, competent, young talent, such as the inside linebacker position, such as the guard position, such as more defensive line positions, right? You could totally acquire through the free agency market through that. But I just have a feeling that this organization right now is looking at wide receiver, especially with just the abundance there, might as well grow through the free agency right now.
Yeah, and that's not even mentioning some of these. You mentioned all the guys in tier 1 and tier 2 for wide receivers that are going to be unrestricted free agents. I know that there was some talk on Bears social media a couple days ago, and this is all just fans, not the Bears actual social media accounts, by the way, talking about the possibility of bringing in a couple wide receivers from the Green Bay Packers. Now, full disclosure, number one, if you're as plugged into the Bears as we are here at Fireside Bears, all four of us, by the way, you're going to know one thing specifically is that we're not going to sugarcoat anything. Now, I certainly do not think Davante Adams is even a possibility for the Bears. And just number two, by the way, why would you even go after Davante Adams? The talent is great, but the money he's going to command is going to be the exact same amount that you're going to have to use to possibly retain James Daniels and Bilal Nichols, or sign Roquan Smith, or a combination of those three names. And then you just factor in the other needs that the Bears have. Yeah, guess what? There's no point in throwing money at Devontae Adams. Everybody I understand here in Chicago wants to lure in the big fish, and everyone thinks that everyone or every single free agent out there is going to go ahead and take a bit of a discount because some way, somehow, Matt Eberflus is building something great. And, Justin Fields is going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the NFL in a couple of years. At least that's what the Bears hope. But also at the end of the day, hold your horses and slow down. All right. Devontae Adams sounds great, but this is not Madden. This is actually building a real life NFL franchise. And let me just say for the record, the last time this team went out and, tried to add to a certain positional group and basically go ahead, and just throw big money out there at a veteran was Robert Quinn and Jimmy Graham in 2020. And, Quinn had a great year, by the way, in 2021, but he still sucked it up in 2020. That you can't deny. And he pretty much admitted, yeah, I sucked it up. And then Jimmy Graham, too, has basically been a non factor for a year and a half at this point because towards the end of the 2020 season, like the second half of the 2020 season, it was all Cole Kmet. It was not Jimmy Graham. The Bears need to build through the draft. Using this Band-Aid approach and just bringing in Devontae Adams sounds great, but it's not the way to build a sustainable long-term winner. Now, there are a couple other veteran wide receivers out there from the Indianapolis Colts, such as a T.Y. Hilton or a Zach Pascal, a couple names that Bears fans really aren't talking about. Pascal's a name I would be really interested in because he's 27, 28 years old. The familiarity is definitely there with Matt Eberflus. You know what he brings to the table. And then T.Y. Hilton's another one. In the event that the Colts just opt to go in a different direction, Hilton's 33 years old. Maybe he is somebody that you bring in just as a kind of veteran piece in the room that has a little bit more left in the tank and he's here for max 1 or 2 years and is basically given the opportunity to basically be like a player's coach at this point, be a wide receiver coach. That's what T.Y. Hilton would bring. Because I think, people forget the Colts have been so hampered by bad quarterback play since Andrew Luck retired, just bad and inconsistent quarterback play. I think we have to admit something is that when T.Y. Hilton had a legitimate quarterback throwing him the ball, he was without a doubt a wide receiver to consistently have to game plan for every single week.
Yeah, Ty is great. Absolutely fantastic talent. He'll go down as one of the best wide receivers, and there's a lot of really good wide receivers in Colt history. But he'll definitely have his name up there for sure. And I'm a little hesitant on bringing in Ty. I completely like the aspect of bringing him in as that locker room guy, just to be a voice. If you're familiar with the Colts Hard Knocks, you just see just how much of a leader Ty is to that team, and how important he is to that team. It'd be very, very, very hard for the Colts to not at least give him an opportunity to retire there. But if it's possible, that's definitely something that I think a young core of wide receivers could use. 100%, I agree. But there's another name on this list that's kind of further down and what they'll fetch for market value if he's allowed to walk is Khalif Raymond from Detroit. This guy is under the radar. He's incredibly fast. He's a 100% fantastic deep ball threat, right? And he has 4 touchdowns on the year, and he looked really good. He's 27 years old, same age as Zach Pascal, and he's going to be pretty cheap too. So, I mean, I'm not kidding you when I'm saying that there are some really, really, really good second to third tier guys in this market that are stuck in bad offenses that could do incredibly well with a complete new change of scenery. And the reason why they're underpaid and undervalued is because they're stuck in bad offenses. So if they're looking at an opportunity to really promote themselves as a player and have a breakout year and be in a completely new scenario in a major media market with an emerging rookie into a sophomore year quarterback that the entire league loves to watch, why not look at Chicago, right? It's incredibly alluring. I think the Bears have to recognize that we have a really good, alluring pitch, right? And yeah, I'm 100% with you on that. That just because Eberflus and Poles are here doesn't mean that Devontae Adams is going to play for Luke Getsy and Justin Fields for $2 million a year, right? No, let's be realistic. But we also have to recognize that some of these guys, like a Christian Kirk, maybe they want to take a next step in their career. Maybe they're done playing in the shadows of other guys and they want to see if they can make it or break it, So I have no issue with that. And that's what I'm saying with regard to the wide receiver position. the Bears should focus in free agency because it's there, right? There's proven talent there. So it's just makes more sense to me to get some guys for the cheap and focus on the next positions that we're about to talk about in the draft. But there's certainly free agent talent across the board there.
Yeah, and getting away from the wide receiver position here, maybe we'll do like a more extensive breakdown as free agency does indeed get closer in the coming weeks here. But something else important to just keep an eye on is the defensive line position because, when you look at this Colts defense under Matt Eberflus, you have to be honest that 2018 and 19, it was good. But what really propelled and put it over the top was when the Colts traded a 2020 first round pick for DeForest Buckner, who undoubtedly became one of the top 3 techs in the league and is now one of the best defensive tackles in the league, only behind guys like Aaron Donald. But the reason I bring it up is because the Bears have a player on their roster, or they've had a player since 2016, I should say, because Akeem Hicks is now a free agent, that can play defensive end, but can also slide inside and play that 3 tech position. Because, by the way, I think Hicks was with the Saints and the Patriots, and he played plenty of 3 tech there. This is going back like 7-8 years at this point, nearly a decade. But, the problem is is the easy solution to do would just be re-sign Akeem Hicks as like a stopgap guy. But the issue that you're running into at the end of the day simply comes down to the fact that I don't think the Bears would want to invest into, especially a new regime. They would not want to invest money into an aging player. And so now you kind of run into this conundrum in terms of what do you do at the 3 tech position, right? Specifically defensive tackle in a 4-3 defense. Because your linebackers, right? Your defensive ends are technically going to be Khalil Mack and Robert Quinn, who are better with their hands in the dirt anyway than they are standing up, just saying. Okay. And then your defensive tackle is a bit of a toss up because you do have Eddie Goldman, who's traditionally been a 0 tech, meaning he lines up over the center. Kyrus Tonga was like, a 1 or a 2 tech last year. I completely have to go back and watch the film. But anyways, he was just more of a rotational guy. Bilal Nichols is, he has experience playing defensive tackle, but Bilal Nichols, unfortunately, in this defense is not going to be the future 3 tech unless, Eberflus and Travis Smith, the new D line coach, just completely develop him. But even that, the Bears are going to have to bring him back for. So the Bears need to find a true 3 tech. And I'm not so sure that the free agent market is where they would go to find that 3 tech. I think more so what's going to happen is they're going to draft and just develop at that position, knowing that it's such an important, critical piece to this team. What needs to happen is that they want to have someone there, not just for 1 or 2 years, but for the next like 10 years.
Yeah, 100%, right? Like I'm right there with you that I think that the positions that really need to be built through the draft for this team are defensive tackle and inside linebacker, like at the end of the day, and cornerback, because we just need more corners. It's just the truth. So like the defense obviously is in a position where it needs to be better. We were riding off the coattails of an aging defense that was incredibly good at what they were doing, but we knew it wasn't going to last very long. So it makes more and more sense every day as to why they brought in a guy like Eberflus to really kind of get this on track and make sure that we're acquiring the right talent. And again, the guys that he brought in as coordinators and assistants are fantastic talent evaluators as well. So, there are a bunch of names at the tackle position in free agency that we could definitely take a look at. Some of them include DJ Jones for the San Francisco 49ers. He's had an incredibly good season. There's a great tackle out of Jacksonville that did well. I'm forgetting his name, but I think he had like 4 or 5 sacks on the season. This is a bit of a tough one because the market for defensive tackles is pretty expensive now. You could get a wide receiver for maybe $1 million less per year than a defensive tackle, honestly, just because of just how demanding that job is. And if you're good, you're great, right? Which is really important. But the Bears also have an abundance of talent, I think, at this position already that we can retain. Kyrus Tonga is maybe a bad fit for where we're headed. As a 3-4, I think he's perfect. For a 4-3, I'm not so sure. He's kind of that, like you said, 1 to 0 tech kind of guy that's just there to kind of stuff up the inside zone or the inside runs. So we're going to need a bit more athletic. We're going to need more genuine three techs, guys who are able to get off the ball quickly, guys who are able to get through the gaps quickly. What makes DeForest Buckner so great is his length. He's incredibly tall. He's just a pure athlete, right? And I think he's the best swim move in the entire NFL. If you're young and you're watching and you're learning how to play defensive line, watch Buckner and watch his technique. It's fantastic. It's just pure, right? So I don't know. I'm not entirely convinced that the Bears should target a defensive tackle in the free agency. And you know, I think that pretty much wraps up the D tackle line. I want to move into a position that I think the Bears can definitely acquire through the free agency and make themselves better, and that would be the tight end. I'm not sure Jimmy Graham should be re-signed. I don't think he will be. I don't think he should be brought back. There's another guy out there by the name of Jesse James who's up for a contract. I'm not so sure that he should be brought back just because of the ridiculous abundance of talent at the position in the market. Let me just read you off some of the names, many of whom may be franchise tagged. Let's just put that out there because of how good they are. But this is the amount of talent that's out there right now. We got Eric Ebron. We have Max Williams. We have Mo Alley Cox. We have Robert Tonyan. We have Evan Ingram. We have OJ Howard. We have Gerald Everett. And we have Mike Gesicki and Donald Parham. You may go, who is this Donald Parham guy? Donald Parham was the tight end for the Los Angeles Chargers that had to be removed from the field, unfortunately, with a gruesome injury. He's doing well. If he's able to lace up next year, this guy is a true red zone threat. If the Chargers don't bring him back, he's an absolute target that the Chicago Bears should look at. He's going to be at a discount, and he's a fantastic, fantastic athlete. He's a tall dude. He brought in 3 touchdowns where he was one of Justin Herbert's favorite end zone targets last season, and for a good reason, right? This guy is an incredible pickup. Bears should also look at Mike Gesicki. He's probably going to get franchise tagged. He's going to make the case that he deserves a wide receiver franchise tag because he's basically a wide receiver on that team. But the Bears should take a look at him. The dude is probably the best catching tight end in the NFL right now. Like, I'm willing to put that out there. He's so undervalued and so underrated, in my opinion. This is a guy that would be revolutionary for this offense, right? He would basically be Justin Fields' best friend, just like he's almost Tua's best friend at this point. And then another guy that I look at in this market is going to be Gerald Everett. I think you can make a pretty good case to pick him up for pretty cheap. He's at Seattle. He came from Los Angeles over to Seattle, and he had a pretty okay season, right? Again, he's a good blocker and he's a good catcher. And that's kind of what we need in this offense right now, especially if we're moving to an outside zone run scheme, is we need guys to block. Jimmy Graham just isn't doing that. Cole Kmet is getting much better at blocking over the past 2 seasons, but we need guys that can block and have hands. And Mike Gesicki is not so much that guy. He's just pure hands and pure talent. But you know, I think Gerald Everett could do both there.
Oh, and let me mention this as well. Dalton Schultz is a free agent too, right? So he's another intriguing name that I don't know. Maybe the Bears look at and say, what could we have there? But, you know, look, when you talk about this tight end position, right? And let me just throw this out there because, again, we're talking about bringing over every former Packers player except Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Oh, but there was the rumor on Monday night circulating around on Bears Twitter that, you know, Aaron Rodgers could possibly be playing for the Bears. Shout out to the guy who tweeted that. I was at Target and, you know, I had to tell a friend that I was on the phone with that was the biggest lie on the planet. It's not going to happen. But yeah, Robert Tonyan's also a free agent. Look, the tight end position for the Bears is certainly intriguing because they don't need, you know, a true number. It would be nice to have a true number 1 tight end, but let's be real. More so what they have to do is get a number 2 tight end, right? Kind of someone that's going to come in and, you know, push these guys such as a Jesper Horsted to really go ahead and JP Holtz, by the way, who both I think are free agents, but you know, no one cares about some of these practice squad guys except Sam and Joe, who are big Jesper Horsted fans. No disrespect to Jesper because he has a great chemistry with Justin Fields, but also at the end of the day, like, you have to be real about something, okay, is that when you look at this team, just at the end of the day, tight end's not that significantly high of a need, but you also do want to see the Bears address it, just knowing that the tight ends are going to be an integral part of what the Bears are hoping to do. Now, one of the things that's really needed to separate yourself as a tight end in the NFL is breakaway speed, right? These top tight ends like a Noah Fant, a George Kittle, a TJ Hawkinson, you know, I'll throw Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith in there, Travis Kelce. They have that breakaway speed to continue to create that separation, okay, from these linebackers and these defensive backs. Okay, there's a couple intriguing names on here. You know, OJ Howard's another one. All right, OJ Howard does not know how to separate for his life at times, but the guy's a big body target. Okay, and oftentimes there's a direct correlation, in case you didn't know, between being a really good route runner, having an expansive route tree as a tight end, and being able to separate.
Yeah, I mean, and I forgot to mention David Njoku too, right? I mean, there's just so many names in here, and again, most of these guys are just too good for these teams to let go. But this market's going to be crazy for tight ends, and I think the Bears could definitely find someone to pair with Cole Kmet here, because Cole Kmet's just getting better. We've seen that over the season, and he has some issues with his route running. So maybe if we have more of a pure catcher kind of guy to come in and really help him out with that, he might be our every down tight end. But again, if we're going to dish out some real money for a name like Evan Ingram or like Robert Tonyan, these guys are going to expect to get more snaps too. So that puts the front office in a really tough position. Is this Cole Kmet guy? Is this a guy that we really want? You know, that we're inheriting him from the last regime, who was really high on him. He hasn't really produced to the point that last regime wanted. What can we do with this guy? So that'll be a really interesting decision to see coming forward. But definitely keep an eye on the tight end market. I'd like to move now to the offensive line. Like Ryan Poles and Eberflus said, this is a huge area of concern. They're really going to be taking a look at this, evaluating it from every angle. But specifically, I think we're pretty good set at the tackle position. I really do. I think Larry Borom had a fantastic season. I think Tevin Jenkins looked good and is just going to continue to look better. There's some good talent at tackle, but I'd really like to focus in on the center position. And there are two names in particular that make my eyebrows raise. And that, of course, is Buccaneers center Ryan Jensen, who's going to fetch a ridiculous amount of money. But more of an under the valued, under radar kind of guy, a hidden gem per se, is Chicago native and current center for the New England Patriots, Ted Karras. This guy, if he's brought back, he's expressed interest to the Patriots that he would like to be re-signed. And if he is re-signed, off the board. But if he's not, this guy is a Illini. He's from Chicago. It would be ridiculous to not bring him back home because he's just good. He's flat out good, and he's young. He's like 27, 28. There's zero reason to not bring this guy in. He played with Brady. He won a Super Bowl. He has ridiculous experience on the line, and he's a mauler. He's tough. He's just, there's so much to like there. And if the Patriots don't bring him back, if they're stupid and they're like, you know what, no, whatever, or if he gets an offer that he really likes a lot more, better be from Chicago.
Look, Ted Karras is certainly interesting because the Patriots have this habit every single year of just letting one or two of their big name free agents go. This year, it's going to be, I think, Ted Karras is a wild card, but I definitely see a situation where J.C. Jackson ain't coming back to the Patriots, who's a cornerback, by the way. But, you know, I looking at Ted Karras, it will totally make sense, okay? It's just the style he plays. But I think another wild card to just kind of keep an eye on would be Billy Price, who was with the Cincinnati Bengals, I believe, and then got cut from there and like ended up in New York some way somehow. And I mean, let's be real, you know, this is a shot at our friends over at Fireside Giants because they absolutely deserve it. But you know, just let Billy Price go because again, your entire offensive line has been rebuilding for the last decade, basically. Okay, like the Giants haven't had a good offensive line since I don't know, probably those guys like Chris Snee, Sean O'Hara were there, which I'm just going to throw this out there. These guys like Chris Snee and Sean O'Hara could probably strap the pads on and be better than anything that the Giants have on the offensive line right now in their old age, by the way. Okay. Justin Pugh, too. Really great offensive line. But, anyways, the point I'm making is that keep an eye on Billy Price as kind of a wild card and a name that, you know, the Bears could possibly look to bring in because all it really takes at this point in the NFL is like a serious change of scenery. And I think knowing Matt Eberflus's experience just in the AFC, he's certainly seen Billy Price develop just over the years. And that could certainly make sense, And then moving away from Billy Price, another interesting name as someone such as sorry, as I get a weird DM from someone on Twitter here. Not the guy who DM'd me last time saying stop eating tacos while you're recording on YouTube. Just I didn't respond to that. But Austin Blythe from the Kansas City Chiefs is a free agent. Okay. He's only like whatever, 29, 30 years old. Knowing that he's pretty much spent his entire career with the Chiefs, you know what? He would make so much sense as a name to just bring in and plug into the offense. And it would allow Ryan Poles to kind of get that veteran in the room at the most important positional group in football outside of quarterback that knows and understands what Ryan Poles is trying to build and what his vision for the offensive line is. That is right, ladies and gentlemen. Austin Blythe would actually be a complete tone setter and someone who would know how to make the proper calls compared to a guy like a Sam Mustipher, who, by the way, I understand we were very high on, but we've admitted he needs to go.
Yeah. Unfortunately, and I was really high on him, and a lot before the season, I put out a lot of stuff that I thought he could make a next step. And, I still think he has a spot in this league. I really do. I think he can still grow. I think he really can be a good center. It's just the strength just isn't there, but everything else is. And I'll tell you what, he's got a lot of leadership, and he just seems like he's a great guy to have in the huddle and a great guy to have in the locker room too. So nothing but good wishes for Sam Mustipher. But that's going to do that for guard. We're going to move to our last position, which should have to be the inside linebacker. There's some great young, cheap talent there as well. This is, shaping up to be a really good free agency for the NFL, so people should get excited. My number one bring back, I think we should look at bringing Alec Ogletree back. He's old. He's 30 years old. I say old relative NFL terms. But he had a great season considering what he was asked to do, where he was put. We're moving back to our 4-3 where we're going to need a solid Mike linebacker, which will be Roquan Smith. But we need that, or no, it will not be Roquan Smith. My bad. Roquan's going to be the will. We need a solid Mike, right? So we need more of that run stuffer, which is what Alec Ogletree literally made his career on and did incredibly well last season. I think putting him back in that position to succeed again in the 4-3 would be ideal. So it makes zero sense for me not to, at least for the Bears, to try to bring him back. And then some names that I'm looking at right now that intrigue me are Kenny Young out of Denver. He had a pretty good year, 75 tackles and 2 sacks on the year, as well as 2 forced fumbles. Juwan Bentley, who the Patriots are going to bring back 100%. He had a crazy breakout year, 109 tackles with 5 sacks. Jermaine Carter out of Carolina. He had 89 tackles and 3 sacks. Pretty cheap too. And then, of course, we have to mention Quan Alexander, who's probably going to get a big contract to remain with the Saints, but he's out there. And then Anthony Walker Jr. Out of the Browns. And the Browns are going to have to really decide what they want to do with the tag here. And they might be looking at some difficulties bringing some of these names back. And Anthony Walker should be on every team's radar if they're looking for a solid inside linebacker.
Yeah, for me at the inside linebacker position, there's really a lot of interesting names that come to mind. Now, obviously, number one, the most obvious thing to do would be to look at a guy like a Leighton Vander Esch, who's, again, just 26 years old. He was, again, drafted in 2018, but Eberflus was already in Indianapolis at the time. But nonetheless, Leighton Vander Esch, or even a guy like Rashaan Evans, they would be 2 names that would be plug-and-play fits into this defense. The problem I think comes down to this is that it's going to be about the green stuff and it's going to be all about money, and those guys are getting their bags. Okay, Jerry Jones has shown basically, hey, look, I'm going to figure out a way to get some of my best players extended, even if I have to overpay, which is what he did with Dak Prescott. No, not Dak Prescott. My God, Ezekiel Elliott. Dak's actually underpaid for all he brings to the Cowboys. Okay. We're also at the point in the show now where I'm just kicking back and relaxing. But, Matthew Adams and Zaire Franklin from the Colts are 2 unrestricted free agents that I honestly would not mind the Bears taking a look at, knowing that Eberflus's track record, and I've mentioned this a bajillion times over the last few weeks, but I'll mention it for the new subs as well on the show, or on the channel, I'm sorry, is that they drafted 19 players over a 4-year period from 2018 to 2021 in Indianapolis while Eberflus was there. All 18 of those 19 guys are on the roster currently, okay? And only one of them was a first round pick. Outside of Xavier Rhodes, who was a first round pick by the Vikings, and DeForest Buckner, who was a first round pick by the San Francisco 49ers. Only Kwity Paye in 2021 was a first round organically homegrown pick by the Colts. So the reason I bring that up is because that ability to draft and develop, you know for a fact the Colts are getting to a point where they need to start investing more on the offensive side of the ball and to help Carson Wentz, who's Chris Ballard's big swinging quarterback. That is why I say Zaire Franklin and Matt Adams makes sense. Now, the thing to understand is that both are 26, 27 years old. They're unrestricted free agents. They are towards the bottom, so you're going to get them of this free agency class because no one's talking about them but us here at Fireside Bears. So, yeah, do your research on those guys. Now, if you follow other Bears Twitter podcasters out there, one of our buddies, who's I consider to be a friend of the show over at the Three Kings of the Midway podcast, Davuri, shout out to him. He's a great guy because he says a lot of things that people may not agree with, but 100 times out of 100, he probably ends up being right. But he mentioned Jalen Smith as being an ideal fit next to Roquan Smith. Now, I want to talk about that for a second because Jalen Smith's time coming out of Notre Dame, the guy was projected to be the top linebacker in his class, and I think he slipped to like round 2 or something simply because he ended up getting injured. Okay, and it was a gruesome injury, and there was all the talk about, oh, is he ever going to be the same guy again? Lo and behold, the Cowboys release him, the Packers go and pick him up, and again, it's not really the greatest fit on the planet with Green Bay. And then what happens is he goes to the Giants and, has a solid, finishes out the year pretty solid there. And then boom, now he's all of a sudden a free agent again. So Jalen Smith's already played in a defensive scheme very similar to this. Knowing that he's so young, you know what? I think he's only a year or two older than Roquan Smith, and he's been in the league since 2016, I believe. Yeah, keep an eye on Jalen Smith. I think he'd be a really phenomenal add to this defense. And what that would do right there is basically give the Bears their linebacker trio for the next few seasons with Roquan and Jalen Smith.
Yeah, I think any Colts linebacker is definitely something to look at, especially with Dave Borgonzi coming over. Of course, he was linebackers coach for 3 years there with Flus at Indianapolis, so he's going to have good rapport with any of those guys that could potentially come over. And of course, Borgonzi is an incredible talent because some of the linebackers that have come out of Indianapolis or are currently there are definitely nothing to scoff at. But Jalen Smith, yeah, definitely interesting. The thing that I think is important is we're looking at size, I think, for me. And Jalen Smith is around the same size as Roquan Smith. He's also incredibly fast. Both of these guys would cover sidelines to sidelines incredibly well. They'd be fantastic in the pass defense. The only issue and only where I have with Jalen Smith is his ability to stuff the run, which is, again, paramount that we have a guy who's able to do that, especially because Roquan's going to be sideline to sideline. It's going to be in coverage. He's going to, shoot the gap. Very actually unlikely because Flukes doesn't really send his linebackers that often, which is interesting. But anyways, no, there's definitely, again, there's so many names to look at, and we could make this episode 2 hours long, but we're not. So we're going to cut it here. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Make sure you're subscribed to us on YouTube. Thank you so much. We hit 350. Very appreciative of you guys. Of course, share it if you like this. We can keep doing it. Go ahead and follow all of our social medias down below. Make sure you follow Usayd on Twitter and me on Twitter or whatever you want to do. And thank you so much. Make sure you keep your eyes peeled on this free agency market because it's going to be an exciting one. And remember to bear down. Also, go Bengals.